Welcome to the Reading Time podcast. I'm Laura and you're listening to episode 1 of the Reading Time. This podcast is for English learners who want to know a little bit more about how English works in different occupations. This is a good resource for you if you want to know how communicative skills work from an ESP perspective. Now, I'm gonna talk to you about reading in ESP, a little bit of its history, analysis, and some other interesting characteristics. So, grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's get started. Reading occupies what might be called a curious place in English for specific purposes. Students almost always cite reading as the skill causing them the least difficulty. Thus, there will not seem to be much reason to address it in ESP. Then, even if many students rank reading as the least difficult of the skills, this doesn't mean that students have no problems at all with reading. There are not then important reasons to focus on reading in ESP courses and conduct research in this area. So in this chapter or this episode, we would be exploring historical roots in the field and discussing more about pedagogical perspective and research concerning reading and its use. So English is the language of textbooks and journals. In other words, for many learners, English is a library language, especially in English as a foreign language context. Thus, there is a new climate in which to approach reading. In a historical review of the development of ESP, the teaching of reading received minimal attention. Therefore, an important use of reading was not highlighted because more importance was given to other communicative skills. Beginning in 1979, they were interested in how the discursive elements of reading and comprehension of text works, equipping students to identify and make use of this skill, becoming a central focus of ESP instructions. So for this appears the transfer process. Visual verbal relationships are very useful tool in teaching reading or transferring the emphasis from teaching to writing. In this approach, students can bring to class authentic samples of figures that represent. With this emphasis on authentic texts drawn from various disciplinary or vocational communities and an analysis of their properties as forms of discourse, ESP was positioning reading like writing as a situated activity. While in ESP courses, students may still be taught a generic set of basic reading comprehension skills. Additionally, a genre comprises a class of communicative events, the members of which share some set of communicative purposes. Reading is sometimes taught on its own as a separate skill, sometimes in conjunction with writing and sometimes as a component of a study skills program. Whether a single skill or an integrated approach is taken, the main focus of reading instruction often tends to be the development of sub-skills related to extracting different types of information from text, such as skimming for gist and scanning for the specific details. In this section, I will look at reading within two primary frameworks suggested as a stand-alone skill, as in the case of courses dedicated to teaching students how to read, and integrated skills framework. Reading teachers naturally want to know what to teach students in ESP reading courses with improving reading comprehension. This had led to interest in building students' knowledge of valuable reading strategies. The use of carefully selected pre-reading materials enhances students' reading skills in a reading course, including general-purpose reading skills that have already been developed. The most necessary skill is to locate the relevant information in the text So pedagogy is oriented towards a mode of location. However, much of the work related to the construction of understanding revolves around the instantiation of basic reading and discourse analysis skills.
I am Daniela Gonzalez, and thank you for continuing listening to this podcast. We already know that reading is a vibrant area of ESP, but we also need to be aware of the issues that reading can involve. For example, we tend to think that the most important thing is to teach how students should read. But here there is a gap because we are not conscious about other important things, such as what students have to read and comprehend. The idea is that an ESP reading teacher helps the student to establish a schema that they need to help them to explore maybe books, characteristics, and look for benefits and limits that they could find, for example, in textbooks. On the other hand, I would like to reflect upon a special characteristic that a general English course and an ESP reading have, and it is in terms of vocabulary because this is an important fact in both. So we know that vocabulary is something gigant, but that kind of courses it could be seen as something most challenging because of the lack of the time. I mean, it is difficult to have a course in which we are just some hours a week and to achieve the awarding of different word families. With this, I am referring to synonyms, antonyms, of that kind of words. Then, if we analyze that issue, we can determine that when an ESP reading student faces, for example, a textbook, they just tend to avoid the vocabulary and not to focus on it. On the contrary, they just try to look for examples or that kind of things, trying to create like an illustration. Because of the above, we can criticize that an ESP teacher should not simply teach like lists of specific or scientific or technical words, but instead should also teach like the context, the structural relation within which the words have meaning. So continue talking about the reading courses. I consider that it is fundamental to mention that through reading we can work on others' skills or to complement them. For example, reading could be linked with writing because just imagine what you normally do when you read. In my case, I tend to take notes or summarize, and the things or the way in which we read is seen in the way in which you write. So we could connect what I already mentioned with a genre-based combination of reading and writing, where basically the students are involved in the context, and on that way the students improve their reading schemas and can locate and understand the different texts. In this part, I want to highlight the importance that cooperation has in this kind of courses because the communication between the ESP teacher and the expert can be very productive. So just before finish, try to think on this special case of portfolios, because I think that we all know what a portfolio is, and we normally associate them with writing, but they could create also a reading analysis and demonstrates that we can work on reading from different ways. A portfolio is not just used for writing, but also for reading, for creating different analysis, or just to comment in the writing what we have learned in the reading. Now we will give away some contributions from people who will tell us a little about the use of reading and the strategies they use to read.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me this space to share my experience with reading in my academic life, which I consider of great importance to know, to discover, and also to explore different texts that increase our cognitive abilities. Well, in my case, I use different strategies that have helped me to have a broader understanding of the text, for example, highlighting or underlining the most important sentences in the document. However, I have a few other strategies that help me to have an overview to answer specific questions. For example, the use of skimming and scanning that allows me to locate what I need at the time of reading. Finally, I have to clarify that learning to read is a difficult process and must be constant, and even more so when speaking from an academic perspective. That we must not forget that reading expands our knowledge and enable us to understand and retain information that in working life we will need it.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. When I started learning English, one of the things that definitely helped me and that pushed me forward was reading. I remember the first book that I read was Tom Sawyer, and it was one of my favorite books, and until the day I remember a lot of what Tom Sawyer and the book was about. When you read, there are several benefits for you when you learn English. First, you're going to grow in your vocabulary. You're going to learn so many new words. Also, you're going to improve your memory. You're going to have to recall the facts that you were reading. You're going to definitely improve your grammar since you are watching every single sentence in the book. So definitely it's going to help you a lot. And at the end, reading also helps you with the ability of unstressing and just relaxing and enjoying some free time. So those are the benefits from reading, and I hope that I can motivate you to read a little bit more. Bye.